Today, we travel back to the antebellum South, where a girl named Alice Flagg fell in love, broke the rules, and paid the ultimate price. Some say she died of illness, others say of heartbreak, but the truth, it never stayed buried. So sit back and let the haunting begin. They buried her with the ring still clutched to her chest. Her body wasn't even cold when they pried open her fingers and found it, small, unremarkable, pressed into her palm with such force it had left an imprint on the skin. A simple gold band. No inscription. No maker's mark. No explanation. Just a circle of metal with mystery trapped inside. Some say she died clutching it because she couldn't let go of the man who gave it to her. Others believe it was buried with her as a cruel joke. Her family's final punishment for loving someone they deemed unworthy. And then there are those who think she was already dead the moment it was taken from her. That her heart simply gave out the moment they ripped that ring from her neck. And that's where the stories begin to fracture, like a cracked mirror reflecting a dozen distorted truths. To this day, people still report seeing her walk in the halls of the Hermitage, her white dress dragging across the wood floors, searching desperately, frantically, for the ring she was never meant to lose. They say she lifts her veil and reveals eyes swollen from weeping, staring not at the living, but at something long, long gone. They say she never forgave them. They say her story isn't over. And once you start peeling it back, layer by layer, it becomes hard to tell where the tragedy ends and the punishment begins. Because this wasn't just a broken heart. This was an execution masked as heartbreak. Mid-19th century South Carolina didn't just believe in social status. It worshipped it. This was a land of plantations, family legacies, and cotton-stained dynasties. Your name mattered more than your character. Appearances were everything, and deviation from the unspoken rules of Southern gentility was treated like heresy. Manners, money, and marriage formed an invisible trinity, and heaven helped the girl who defied it. This was Murrells Inlet, a quiet coastal town choked by Spanish moss and haunted by tides that brought more than just driftwood. Back then, it was the kind of place where secrets rotted slower in the humidity. You could be dead and buried before scandal reached the next county line. The Flagg family was aristocracy here. Proper, proud, powerful, and extremely conscious of appearances. They resided at the Hermitage, a grand white-columned house that looked like something stolen from a Gothic romance novel. Its porches were wide, its windows tall, its history already old. It sat on land soaked in both wealth and silence. Two things that often go hand in hand when death enters a room. Women in that world were supposed to be porcelain, pretty, polished, and placed on a pedestal to be admired, never moved. Education was fine as long as it was ornamental. Marriage was expected as long as it was strategic. And feelings? Feelings were for poets and mad women. So when young Alice Flagg, bright-eyed, modest, and dangerously warm-hearted, started to drift from the script, the air around the Hermitage began to change. But this isn't one of those old Southern belle tales with tragic corset swoons and polite deaths. No, this one gets mean, because Alice didn't just fall in love. She fell beneath her class. And in a world like this, that kind of fall is worse than murder. Alice Flagg wasn't born rebellious. She was raised to be perfect. By all accounts, she was the epitome of what Southern womanhood was supposed to look like. Graceful, dutiful, well-bred, and quiet in the right ways. Her mother, a widow fiercely protective of the family name, ensured it. Her brother, a rising social figure, and doctor named Alice Flagg, reinforced it. Her home life was a stage where everyone had a role to play, and Alice played hers with precision for a time. She was 17 when things started to shift, not just in her behavior, but in the way she looked at the world. The kind of shift you only notice when someone starts seeing instead of obeying. The Hermitage would hold her body, but her spirit began to wander, searching for something unspoken, something true. She was often seen walking the marshes alone, trailing the water's edge like she was waiting for the tide to tell her secret. Locals describe her as kind, gentle, even dreamy. But there was still underneath that softness, just enough to be dangerous. And then he appeared. His name never made it into the official records. That's how deep the shame ran. The man Alice loved was not a gentleman. He wasn't wealthy, titled, or even particularly educated. He was a lumber merchant's apprentice, or maybe a tradesman's son. It depends on who you ask, because the Flagg family erased him like a stain they refused to admit existed. But he existed, and Alice loved him enough to wear his ring on a ribbon around her neck, tucked beneath her collar, hidden from the people who claimed to know what was best for her. The love was quiet, secret, reckless. It was the kind of love you read about in burned diaries and buried letters, delicate, forbidden, and fatally honest. And when her family found out, the walls closed in. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She stayed, hoping reason might soften them. It didn't. They stripped her of the relationship, then the ring, then her dignity. And eventually, though no one meant to say it out loud, her life. It began with a headache, just a dull throb behind Alice's eyes. Nothing urgent, nothing alarming, but it stayed. Then it grew. It crept down her neck like something whispering in a language only pain understands. She started feeling faint, dizzy. Her appetite vanished. Her color changed. And still, no one suspected anything beyond melancholy, because heartbreak wasn't considered an illness. By the time her family admitted she was sick, Alice was already fading. The timeline is messy here. Some say she collapsed at the Hermitage. Others claim she was already away at boarding school in Charleston, sent there hastily after her mother intercepted the love letters and confiscated the ring. Exile dressed as education. The symptoms worsened. Fatigue, fever, spasms. Her words slurred. Her hands trembled. Her body betrayed her. And yet, again, this is where the legends get mean. There's a version of the story where Alice never stopped touching her chest, right where the ribbon had once hung, as though it were still there, as though the loss of the ring had torn something out that her body couldn't heal from. Was it typhoid fever? Malaria? A brain tumor? The 19th century was a horror show of undiagnosed agony and vague medical guesses. Women especially were written off as hysterical when their bodies rebelled. But here's what we know. Alice begged to return home. By the time they let her, she could barely stand. Her mother arranged for a carriage to bring her back to the Hermitage. She lay still the entire ride, a ghost in motion. And when they finally pulled her through the white columned doorway, she barely made it up the stairs. She collapsed into her bed, never stood again. Within hours, she slipped into unconsciousness. And then, just like that, she was gone. 17, dead. No war, no violence. Just gone, like a candle blown out in a sealed room. And here's the part that catches in your throat. As they prepared her body for burial, someone, likely her mother or brother, noticed her hands were clenched tightly around something small. The ring, the one they'd taken from her. Hidden, smuggled, somehow retrieved. She died, clutching it. They buried her with it pressed to her chest. That should have been the end. It wasn't. You'd think death would be the full stop, the exclamation point, the punctuation that ends a sentence. But with Alice Flagg, death was just a comma, because the story didn't end with her burial. It shifted. Let's start with the grave. Her family didn't bury her in the family plot. That would have made too much sense, and perhaps, too much peace. Instead, they buried her in a simple unmarked grave at All Saints Episcopal Church in Pawleys Island, beneath a slab of stone etched with only one word, Alice. No surname, no dates, just her first name, like a guilty whisper. Locals began to whisper almost immediately, not out of cruelty, but out of something closer to reverence or fear or both. They said she never rested, that her spirit walked the marshes at night, still searching for the man she loved, that she roamed the Hermitage, white dress billowing, eyes empty, and then people started seeing her. Children described a sad lady near the marsh with bare feet and wild eyes. Visitors to Hermitage, long abandoned by then, claimed to hear footsteps pacing upstairs, or a woman's voice humming the same tune over and over like a lullaby meant for someone who never arrived. One man even reported waking up at the old plantation house with a single gold ring lying on his chest. But here's where things start to spiral. The grave, the damn grave. People began leaving rings on her headstone. Real ones, cheap ones, family heirlooms, plastic junk. It didn't matter. They believed she wanted them, that she was collecting them, that she was still looking for the one they took from her. And sometimes the rings vanished. No birds, no pranksters, just gone. Now look, I know how urban legends work. I know how grief gets mythologized, especially in the American South, where ghost stories are practically a sacrament. But there's a tension here that doesn't feel like fiction. There's a grief punctuated by guilt, because Alice didn't die of heartbreak. Not really. She died because she was told that love was a disease, and they tried to cure it by force. Whatever she caught, typhoid, encephalitis, whatever, wasn't the only thing that killed her. Her body was weak. Her spirit was cracked. Her will was bent in half. And nobody tried to save the part of her that mattered most. And that's why her story keeps bleeding out through time. Because even the dead get restless when they're buried under lies. You'd think that by now, someone would have dusted off a journal, unearthed a letter, or uncovered a dusty county record to explain the strange death of Alice Flagg. But no, what we have instead is a house of mirrors where every reflection lies a little differently. The historical record? Fragmented. Newspaper clippings? Sparse. Autopsy? Non-existent. It's like the Flagg family scrubbed the entire affair with bleach and polite denial. The official cause of death? Illness. A word as vague and dishonest as a Southern gentleman's apology. So the gaps have been filled with folklore and obsession. Some say she faked her fainting spells at first, playing up the drama to guilt her family until performance became reality. Others believe the ring wasn't returned to her by accident, but that someone, maybe a housemaid, maybe a sympathetic sibling, smuggled it back to her in the final hours, an act of rebellion dressed as compassion. There's even a theory, whispered in the way you only whisper things when you're both afraid and thrilled by the possibility, that Alice didn't die naturally at all, that something darker happened. Poison, perhaps, slow and subtle. After all, what better way to erase a scandal than to let the shame rot from the inside? The family? Silent. Always silent. Alice Flagg, her older brother, was a doctor. He of all people should have noticed a decline in her health. But instead, he's remembered more for the Greek revival mansion he built next door and less for the ghosts his family inherited. And her mother? Cold as the headstone she ordered. She viewed Alice's love not as romantic, but disgraceful. A misalliance. A threat to lineage. You don't react with empathy when someone breaks your world. You react with correction, punishment, distance. But maybe the most disturbing theory of all? Maybe Alice wasn't haunted by a broken heart. Maybe she was just a victim of medical ignorance, emotional starvation, and a system that suffocated women for wanting anything more than what they were told to want. Maybe she never had a ghost story. Maybe she just had a story nobody wanted to tell, without dressing it in superstition. That's the real horror, isn't it? That the supernatural explanation is the kindest one. Because if the ghost is real, at least she's still here. If it's not, then she was just a girl they let die for crime of wanting to choose. The moment you realize this wasn't just a personal tragedy, it hits like a slap. Alice Flagg didn't just lose a love. She lost autonomy. Her family didn't just remove a ring. They stripped her of agency like peeling paint off an antique they decided to restore. The turning point isn't one clean moment. It's a descent. A slow, surgical unraveling of identity in the name of decorum. Let's be clear, this wasn't Romeo and Juliet. It was psychological execution, carried out in pastel parlor rooms with polite smiles. And maybe the worst of it, everyone around her played their part in silence. Her mother, Eliza Flagg, played matriarch and warden, controlling Alice's every step under the sanctified banner of protection. But you don't protect someone by locking their emotions in a vault and throwing away the key. You protect them by listening, which no one did. And then there's the brother, Allard, the doctor, the literal man of science. He could diagnose a disease, but missed the one that was killing his own sister. Despair weaponized by control. Do you know what it feels like to scream into a velvet room? Because that's what happened here. Alice got quieter, more obedient. The way people do when resistance is no longer worth the punishment. Her body didn't fail her. Her hope did. And when she collapsed, whatever the cause, it was like the family exhaled. They didn't rush to save her. They rushed to contain the damage. She was brought back to the Hermitage not out of compassion, but containment. As if they couldn't let the neighbors see what heartbreak does to a girl when you skin her will and stuff it with shame. They buried her and erased the man she loved from every record. Not a name, not a date, nothing. He ceased to exist in the narrative. Poof. And here's the twist that guts you. They thought they won. They thought the scandal was buried with her. That silence could be mistaken for peace. That by removing the ring, they removed the danger. But the story didn't stay dead. The ghost came back, not just as footsteps and whispers, but as a cultural rebellion, a tragic symbol of love denied, womanhood punished, autonomy annihilated. Alice didn't just break down. She was broken. The turning point isn't in her collapse. It's in ours, when we realize how many girls like her were buried under different names. And now we arrive at the part where every true crime junkie starts looking for closure. Justice. A clean ribbon to wrap around a dirty truth. Spoiler, you won't find it here. Because Alice Flagg's story has no resolution. Only rot that never quite finishes decomposing. No one was held accountable. No deathbed confession. No posthumous apology. The Flagg family didn't crumble under the weight of their decision. They built more mansions, held their heads high, continued their bloodline. The Southern aristocracy knows how to survive its own sins. It buries them in porcelain smiles and legacy walls. And as for the man she loved, he disappears from the record like a magician's assistant, vanished mid-act. Some say he left town disgraced. Others say he died in obscurity, never remarrying. There's even a rumor he returned to her grave every year on the anniversary of her death and left a single flower. But again, rumors are what you're left with when the facts are buried deeper than the corpse. Her grave, though, that became its own ecosystem of mourning. People still visit. They still walk around it backwards, 3 times, as legend demands, waiting for her ghost to appear. They still whisper apologies, still leave rings, still try to piece together a puzzle with missing corners. But here's what haunts me. The unanswered questions aren't supernatural. They're human. What illness actually killed her? Was it typhoid, meningitis, or heartbreak pressed into a physiological collapse? Why did her family hide the details? Why bury her without a surname? Why let the legend grow instead of telling the truth? Or did the lie become too convenient to correct? There's something horrifying about a mystery that lives because people prefer it unsolved. The ambiguity gives us room to turn Alice into a symbol. But symbols don't bleed. They don't scream. They don't beg for their lives while clutching a ring to their chest, hoping, just hoping, that someone will understand. We can't ask her what really happened. And that silence, that's the final insult. Because when you strip someone's truth, their voice, their love, and finally their life, and then refuse to explain why, you've created not a ghost, but a wound. And wounds like that don't close. They seep. You can bulldoze a building. You can rewrite a family tree. But you can't kill a ghost that's fed by guilt. Alice Flagg never became a folk hero in the traditional sense. There were no justice marches, no statues, no curriculum addendums. But somehow her name survived centuries of silence. Not as a martyr, as a haunting. And honestly, that's so much more honest. The Hermitage stands empty now, rotting, abandoned. The shutters creak, the floorboards collapse. But people still break in, not to vandalize, but to witness. Paranormal investigators, TikTok thrill seekers, local teenagers with just enough fear to call it fun. They light candles. They whisper her name. They say they feel cold on the second floor. They say the mirrors fog when you talk about the ring. And in the graveyard, the slab marked Alice has become a pilgrimage site, an altar, a scar carved into marble. People crawl on their knees around it. They leave rings like offerings to a deity they don't believe in but desperately want to. It's both beautiful and pathetic, like try to atone for a sin you didn't commit just to feel better about the world you inherited. Local legends claim that if you leave a ring and your heart is impure, you'll lose it. Some say she takes it. Some say she judges you. Some say she's still waiting for his ring to return. There are plays based on her, poems, short films, the occasional song. Every few years, some low-budget ghost doc dredges up her name with dim lighting and fake screams. But none of it captures the real tragedy, because you can't dramatize what it feels like to be erased. This wasn't some Victorian girl fainting into a lace pillow. This was a systemic ritual of romantic annihilation. It happened in silk bedrooms and on porch swings with sweet tea and judgment behind every smile. Alice's legacy isn't just about lost love. It's about the way we polish tragedy into folklore, so we don't have to feel complicit in its truth. It's about the way society still asks women to earn the right to choose, even in death. You want a ghost story? Here it is, a society so obsessed with perfection that it would rather bury a daughter than admit it failed her, and we still haven't learned. Maybe the scariest part isn't that Alice Flagg haunts the marshes. Maybe it's that we don't hear her scream. She doesn't throw chairs across empty hallways. She doesn't drag her nails down the walls of the Hermitage. No demonic voices, no dripping blood, just silence, and absence so loud it drowns out the living. Because this story, it isn't about a ghost. It's about the erasure of a person in real time. They took her love and called it foolish, took her ring and called it proper, took her name and buried it under a single word. And then they stood back and called it grace. What we're left with is a girl carved out of history by the very hands that raised her, a white dress in the corner of your eye, a feeling at your throat that maybe, just maybe, we're still doing this, calling rebellion hysteria, calling silence healing, calling punishment love. There's a detail no one talks about, buried in one of the more obscure versions of the tale, that Alice's hand was still curved, even in death, as if she were still holding the ring, as if she refused to let go. Even in rigor mortis, she was grasping for something they couldn't take. That's not superstition, that's survival. And if she really is still walking, if she really does trail through the Hermitage at night, her eyes blank and sorrowful, it's not because she's lost. It's because she was never allowed to be found. Let that haunt you. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next case.